notice. I'm very clear that we're not going to have an indefinite backstop, that we will ensure that the backstop is a temporary arrangement. As I said in my statement, the third point I said was, while I do not believe this will be the case, if the EU were not to cooperate on our future relationship, we must be able to ensure that we cannot be kept in this backstop arrangement indefinitely. I could not expect this House to agree to a deal unless we have the reassurance that the UK as a sovereign nation has this say over our arrangements with the EU.
Richard Graham.
Mr. Speaker, during Saturday's excellent victory by Gloucester Rugby against the French league champions Castres Olympique.
Speaking for well over an hour and a half, then, the Prime Minister addressing all sides of the House of Commons and, in a nutshell, in the last 90 minutes, summing up her dilemma. She is being attacked from all sides, all having a different view of what Brexit means to them, both those from the other side of the Irish Sea, also Jacob Rees-Mogg taking his opportunity to offer his view on Brexit and what it should look like, and of course the eponymous Boris Johnson. He was involved as well. Jeremy Corbyn offering the view from the Labour benches as well. So quite a few challenges for the Prime Minister, but she's still standing, and she will be when Mark Austin takes over in just a few moments' time. Do stay tuned, and I'll see you at 2 o'clock tomorrow afternoon.
5 o'clock and you're watching the News Hour on Sky News. I'm Mark Austin. Coming up in the next 60 minutes. Brexit breakdown over Ireland. The Prime Minister insists it's a time for cool heads.
We have been clear that we cannot agree to anything that threatens the integrity of our United Kingdom.
Trump suggests rogue killers could be behind the disappearance of a Saudi journalist. At least 13 dead in flash flooding in southwest France. The Queen's delight as Harry and Meghan announce they're expecting a baby in the spring. And this evening, why it matters. Loneliness, the growing crisis, the cost to the NHS, and why it matters to tackle it. But we begin the News Hour this evening with a Brexit breakdown over the Irish border. The Prime Minister has told the Commons it was frustrating that an impasse had been reached on how to guarantee no hard border in Northern Ireland. But she said a Brexit deal was still achievable. Mrs May called for cool, calm heads.
The EU still requires a backstop to the backstop, effectively an insurance policy for the insurance policy. And they want this to be the Northern Ireland only solution that they had previously proposed. We have been clear that we cannot agree to anything that threatens the integrity of our United Kingdom.
In a moment, I'll be getting the EU perspective from our Europe correspondent Mark Stone, but first to our political editor Faisal Islam in Parliament's central lobby this evening. Good evening, Faisal. And, you know, the Prime Minister calling for cool, calm heads, but it's increasingly difficult to see a way through this problem.
I have to say, it's been said now pretty much since the general election where the Prime Minister lost her majority, trying to identify exactly what a Commons majority, what a deal that could command a Commons majority would look like has been a difficulty for the people paid to do some soothsaying on this issue. And what we had in Parliament today, this was a Commons occasion that we didn't expect before it was announced by Number 10 this morning, with the Prime Minister trying to kind of fend off attacks on her plan from all sides and all shades, 3 or 4 or 5 different types of attack from small subgroupings within Parliament, cross-party, whether it was the Brexiters that we know about, Boris Johnson and Jacob Rees-Mogg, whether it was the sight of Nigel Dodds looking very frustrated about the lack of clear clarification from the Prime Minister that yes, there'll be no customs border in the Irish Sea, but will there be absolutely no changes in the regulatory checks on GB, Northern Ireland trade as well? Prime Minister didn't seem to answer that question, and Nigel Dodds, the Westminster leader of the DUP, seemed frustrated. But the notable occurrence was a series, 10 or 12 different MPs, some of them you might expect, some of them you wouldn't, who were trying to bounce the PM or say to the PM that in this chaos as they see it, there should be another referendum, what they call a people's vote. And perhaps the most dramatic moment there was Dominic Grieve, the Conservative, formerly seen to be the leader of the rebellion, the Remainer rebellion, the Conservative Party, who stood down essentially and did not rebel at a crucial moment in July, dramatically announcing that he could not support the Prime Minister's deal if she did not put this back to the people, because the shape of the deal that she is offering is so different to what is going to be offered or what was promised to be offered at the time of the referendum. So I think if you stand back and just survey what we have just seen over the past hour in the House of Commons, it is a series of different groupings and subgroupings all complaining about the Prime Minister's deal for different reasons, and thus it is difficult to see how she amasses the majority she needs to get some sort of deal through the House of Commons. The Whips are still confident that they can. They think that the equation will change if she comes back from Brussels with some sort of deal. That's looking slightly less likely this week than it was before the weekend, and it may take till November, perhaps even later. But the Prime Minister trying to clarify, trying to get the Commons on board, important cabinet meeting this morning. But I think anyone who suggested that this was going to be easy, that it was a done deal, that it would fly through the European negotiation and then fly through the Commons, well, they would have had their that notion kind of slightly undermined by just watching what's going on in the Commons with all the different groupings that we've seen over the past hour or so.
Right, but she's saying that a deal is still achievable, but it's, you know, every bit as likely that it'll be a no deal by the way it's going.
Yes, I mean, this is the difficulty. And I think she probably can. She said progress had been made in terms of what's difficult right now. Yes, Dominic Raab did not come back from that unexpected sojourn to Brussels yesterday with a deal. There is a problem, and it gets really quite technical, but essentially the problem is that the Europeans have re-established, put back on the table, something that was deemed unacceptable in February, which is a legal text which implies Northern Ireland would have to stay in part of the EU's customs territory. This was roundly rejected at the time. The Prime Minister points out it was unanimously rejected by Parliament in terms of an amendment to the customs bill. So that has created a new problem, what is being called a backstop to the backstop. Actually, there's also been some progress where the Europeans have started to accept the notion that just perhaps a backstop deal designed to protect the current working of the Northern Ireland border could apply to the whole of the UK, but in return for that, there needs to be not just alignment on customs, and some of the Brexiters think, well, that sounds a little bit like a customs union, but there also has to be alignment on certain single market rules too. And I think that has flashed the warning lights amongst some of the Conservative Brexiters. But in essence, she tries to please the DUP, she upsets some of the Brexit Tories, she tries to please some of the Remainer voters, she upsets others. She faces problems in all directions, and I think never have we seen it more clearly than in that hour when she's still on her feet and she's trying very hard. And it may be that her route through this is to say, look, everybody wants something different here. There's little groups of 30 and 40 all over the place. There's nobody who's going to get exactly what they want. So perhaps that shows that she's somewhere in the territory that should, in a compromising House of Commons, be able to command just about a majority of people who accept what was the result of the referendum in 2016. But I have to say, that was quite the Commons performance and a number of new developments. She also said, and it's worth stressing this, she also criticised inherently or implicitly some of the solution to the Northern Ireland problem put by the Tory Brexiters. She said in very stark terms that it could lead to equipment which could come under attack or surveillance that wouldn't be allowed or wouldn't be acceptable in Northern Ireland. So the sharpest direct criticism we've heard from the Prime Minister of some of the solutions offered by her own backbench Brexiters too.
Faisal, thank you very much for now. That's the view from Westminster. Let's cross now to Brussels and Mark Stone, our Europe correspondent. And Mark, how is it being viewed, this impasse in Brussels, and what would they make of Theresa May's statement today?
Well, I think it's telling that today in Brussels, when they were supposed to be busy drafting some sort of a deal for the leaders to effectively sign later on this week, there hasn't been any overt irritants, to be honest. They've been quite reserved. They haven't thrown their toys out the pram and said, look, you know, this is a disaster. And the reason for that is the performance that we've just seen in the Commons. They are fully aware of just how precarious a position Theresa May is in, just how many battles, how many fires she's got to fight at home. And so I think they're not showing any irritants, as I say. But there have been several comments from various different EU leaders. First of all, Emmanuel Macron, the French president, has been speaking in the last hour in a press conference with the South Korean president that he's been holding. He was asked about Brexit, naturally, and he confirmed that he will be speaking to Theresa May on the phone this afternoon. I imagine that will be happening any time now. He says, I want the technical and political talks to continue, and I will talk later today with Theresa May. We are ready for all scenarios in case there is a no deal. He added that he believed in what he called collective intelligence, and the two sides could move forward. So that is the view of the French president. The Irish foreign minister, clearly a key player in all of this, given that the Irish backstop is the key problem. He's down in Luxembourg today, where foreign ministers are meeting. Here is his take on what is going on with Brexit. Any insight?
Oh, are you fine?
I'm fine. How are you?
Me too.
Are we at an impasse, Mr. Barnier? Is
Are
there
you-
a way through, Mr. Barnier?
Are you a little worried?
Be patient.
You're patient. Okay. Be patient. Clearly, Mark, that wasn't Simon Coveney. That was Michel Barnier. He's the chief negotiator for the European Union. We were catching up with him here in Brussels. He was due to have a busy day, as I say, drafting documents for the summit later on this week. It's not gone that way because they're not going to get a deal this week. Instead, he was having lunch in a pizza restaurant. Be patient was the message from Michel Barnier. I hope now we can hear from Simon Coveney, his take.
I think we are frustrated.